Hey you guys, so unless you've been living under a rock, you have heard about the earthquake at Delhi. Wait, that is a scientifically inaccurate joke, because if you were living under a rock, then earthquake you would have felt. And I know this is really concerning, just like all the noises on the outside over there, but if you are concerned about the earthquake, then it is appropriate to be concerned. But if it's taking you to a place of apocalypse, then perhaps there isn't that much to be worried about. What I'm going to do today is, of course, bring science and common sense to the rescue. I know, easier said than done, but you don't even have to do anything except for sit back, ignore those sounds, and enjoy the video. I don't like to make "that's what he said" kind of jokes, but you know what? Let's start at the top. The top of the earth is what I meant, which is what we call a crust. So let's go back. There's 4 layers of the earth. The uppermost layer is the crust. It's a very important layer, as most pizza places will tell you, but it also is the layer that we can see. It's the thinnest layer, but also it's not that thin, so we're not going to fall through it anytime soon. It can be pretty deep actually, even though it is the thinnest layer. So it can be as deep as 5 kilometers at the ocean floor, which is also part of the crust. And it could also be 70 kilometers, which is what we call the continental crust, which is not like a pizza with some continental toppings on it. That is not what that is. So that's the first layer. The second layer is the mantle. The mantle runs pretty deep. In fact, it's about 3,000 kilometers. And why do you need to know all of this crust and the mantle? We'll get to that in just a bit. But below the mantle is the outer core of the earth. The outer core of the earth is super hot. It's made up of iron and nickel. It's about like 5,000 degrees Celsius, and it is so hot that those metals are actually in the liquid form. So this is the outer core of the earth. The outer core of the earth is extremely important because it actually is responsible for creating the earth's electromagnetic field, and that's something that actually helps protect the earth from some of the sun's harmful like solar storms. Which brings us to the last part of the earth, which is the inner core. I know you're thinking about all kinds of abs exercises, aren't you? This is really not that at all. Your inner core of the earth is actually a layer that also comprises of iron and nickel, but because it is under so much pressure, it no longer is liquid, it has compacted into a solid. And I know that is hard to believe, but this is what happens to mass. So if you compress a gas, if you put pressure on a gas, it turns to liquid, like like liquid petroleum gas or like your CNGs. And if you can compress liquids, it can turn into a solid. Sometimes solids turn into rock hard solid. You can think about shit at this point, talk about how solid things can get under pressure. But the inner core of the earth is actually solid. It is also the hottest part of the earth, as hot as the surface of the sun. This is true. So 4 layers. Why are we talking about this? Great question. So let's get back to the first 2 layers, the crust and the mantle. Somewhere between the crust and the mantle are these things called the tectonic plates. These plates have always been there. Yeah, there's plates in the earth more than just the plates in the sink right now. Like, it's okay, we can talk about washing bartan later on, but really, you know how, like, speaking of washing bartan, when there's all these plates put together, sometimes they can clash against each other, and that's what can happen sometimes with these tectonic plates, as well as that they really exist in alignment with each other. Oh wow, this is arthritis. Imagine this is straight. So tectonic plates can actually be aligned with each other. These plates really have been moving for like millions and millions and millions of years. And so sometimes when these touch each other, they can bump against each other, and that is when an earthquake gets caused. So it's important to understand that these tectonic plates have always been moving, even before the coronavirus, even after the coronavirus. And we have, as human beings, built structures on top of things that we expect will never move, but they have been moving and they will continue to move. And sometimes these movements get recorded as an earthquake. They also have been moving even when we can't feel them. In fact, the way we can feel some of these plate shifts is actually measured with an instrument called a seismograph. So these earthquakes can be measured with that seismograph. And a lot of times earthquakes are so subtle that we can't even feel them. In fact, there's a scale on which these bumps of the plates are actually measured. So we're going to talk about the scale right now. According to the Richter scale, designed by Charles Richter in the year 1935. So I mean, earthquakes have been there for a while, even before we discovered ways to measure it. But anyways, going back to the Richter scale, there's 9 different levels, I guess, of intensity of the earthquake, and let's tackle these one at a time. So the first one is from 0 to 1.9. These are really earthquakes that can only be measured by a seismograph. Like, human beings will not be able to feel it unless, of course, you lived under a rock. The next level is from 2 to 2.9. At that level on the Richter scale, you would see, some swinging, and I'm not talking about the kind of plans that you have made with your partners, and that's the extent of that kind of an earthquake. The next on the Richter scale is from 3 to 3.9. This is really an earthquake that feels almost like the vibrations of a truck moving by. So you can feel it, but it really does not cause damage. The next is from 4 to 4.9, in which, some tiny windows and things like that might break and small unstable objects might fall down. The earthquake that happened in Delhi was on the Richter scale 4.1. This is what you need to know. The next is 5 to 5.9 on the Richter scale. This is where furniture would start to move and you might see some plaster fall off the walls and things like that. From 6 to 6.9 on the Richter scale, you would see some damage to well-built structures and a lot more damage to poorly built structures. But sometimes we know that bridges have fallen just from the vibrations of trucks even, and that is a great example of poorly built structures. From 7 to 7.9 on the Richter scale is when you would see buildings being displaced and some underground pipes might get broken and things like that. On a Richter scale of 8 to 8.9, buildings would practically be destroyed and few structures would be left standing. And this is not a joke about erectile dysfunction. There's nothing funny about that. And finally, greater than 9 on the Richter scale is what would cause total destruction, and you would actually see waves of the earth moving, and that would be visible to the naked eye as well, and this has nothing to do with whether you're wearing clothes or not. So, the earthquake in Delhi was on a Richter scale. It measured 4.1. If you remember, 4.1 is when windows might break and small unstable objects might fall, so just hold on to your grandmothers. That's a really terrible joke, because you know what? They might be small because of loss of bone density, because of osteoporosis that comes with age for women, but they're really not objects, even though they're women. So, the next question is, why do these earthquakes keep happening at Delhi? There is a reason for it. So yes, it is prone to more earthquakes because it belongs to a zone that is prone to more earthquakes. So our country, with regards to earthquakes, has been divided into 4 zones. Zones 2, 3, 4 and 5. And this really coincides with the sensitivity that these zones might have to earthquakes. Areas that belong to zone 2 have a lower incidence and a lower risk of earthquakes compared to areas 4 and 5. And Delhi actually gets assigned to be a zone 4 place. Zone 5 is largely covered by Uttarakhand and Jammu and Kashmir, as well as the mountainous parts of Madhya Pradesh. And it makes sense because it is the tectonic plates shifting and bumping into each other that also causes these mountains in the first place. And the Kutch region of Gujarat and also the states of the northeast of India all fall under the zone 5. The central states in India belong to zone 3 in terms of risk of earthquake, and the states in the south belong to zone 2, which have the lowest risk of an earthquake. And this has just to do with the tectonic plates, but some people might definitely give credit to Rajnikant. So bottom line, yes, there have been a few earthquakes in Delhi, and I know that between the coronavirus and the locusts and the forest fires and these earthquakes, it might seem a little bit like doomsday, but you guys, we have to not succumb to that line of thought. This is not apocalyptic. It is apocalyptic in our minds. It's taken us to scary places, and it's okay to be a little bit afraid. But here was science to the rescue. This is really not the end. Except, of course, with regards to the video, because this is the end. Bye.